And welcome to the SGS webinar, Decoding Requirements Based on Risk for Food Packaging Companies. Please read the housekeeping guidelines that you see on the screen. Silence your cell phones as well, and we shall take this presentation off here just momentarily. Please hang on. Okay, everybody. Just so everybody knows, we will be recording this presentation and we'll be able to download it online. So again, we're having this webinar is Decoding Requirements Based on Risk for Food Packaging. Jennifer Lott and I are on the call, and we'll be taking questions at the end. Okay, so Jennifer Lott and I, like I said, are here. You can see both of our emails and things about us. Jennifer is our Technical Development Director at SGS North America. Very, very well versed in the food world. She specializes in the food product safety management systems with expertise in all things associated with certification, including training, project management, and such. Jennifer has a commitment to excellence, a positive can-do attitude, and is always looking for opportunities to develop solutions to meet the needs of our clients. Outside of work, Jennifer enjoys hiking, volunteering, creating new recipes from leftovers, and spending time with her family. So we will welcome Jennifer to the webinar. Myself, I've been in the business over 15 years personally in the TIC world. I'm well versed in all the GFSI schemes as well as the quality schemes, so I'm here to help you with that. Some other things about SGS, so people know it or not. We are the #1 world leader in the certification world. Well over 98,000 employees, 2,650 offices around the world, not counting home offices, so don't count those people. We focus on 7 different focus areas, basically everything to do with quality, systems, food safety, and such. Just a brief rundown of our history. We were founded in 1878. It's a little over, 145 years ago, I guess now. In the mid-20th century, we diversified into inspection, testing, and verification services. We got listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange in 1981. So we're well-versed and well able to help everybody everywhere. Some knowledge solutions that we have and are available for you today is certification in all of the GFSI and ISO schemes. We do training that we offer. And by the way, at the end of the webinar, if you pick up my email, you send me a special note, I can get you a discount on your trainings that we can do for you. Just a little side note for you. Customized audits are a great thing that we can do for you. So please let us help you put any of these kinds of things, including supplier audits, to your teams there. And technical consulting, we can help you with your operational efficiencies. The SGS difference is we are global with local experts, partnering with all the industry regulatory and associations. So we can definitely help you out with your teams there. We offer quality of service through our global network, basically an end-to-end partner for you. So the agenda for today is going to be simple. We just did the introduction real quick, and we'll pass it over to Jennifer in just a moment. The agenda is basically based on the risk requirements that are necessary for the food packaging companies. We're going to go over RPN, risk prioritization number, justification, documentation, some review and approval, and we'll follow it up at the end if any time allows for question and answer. Also note that if we have additional questions that come up, we'll be able to answer those offline if we run out of time. So here's a quick poll for you. Does your organization have packaging certification? Please answer that, and then we will move forward with the show. A for yes, B for no, C if you're not sure. We'll give this just a few more questions. Okay, let's see how the results came up on that. All right, look at this. 41.7% are certified to some packaging certification, 50% aren't, and 8.3% are not sure. Well, the 50% that aren't, we know how we can help you with that. You got the best team right here on call with you. And the ones that are, even better, we're here to help you out, whether you're with SGS or not. We have many, many abilities that we can handle for you. Since we're not your certification body or are, just give us a call. On that note, Jennifer, I'm going to pass it over to you. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Scott, for your warm welcome. So let's get started with some basic definitions. Risk assessment is a systematic process of identifying risk and evaluating the associated risk. This is used to determine possible risk, their likelihood and consequences, and their tolerances. The results of this process may be expressed quantitatively or qualitatively, and later in our presentation, we'll discuss using risk prioritization numbers, or RPN for short, for the quantitative analysis of risk. Risk assessment is an inherent part of a broader risk management strategy to help reduce any potential risk-related consequences, such as identifying the level of risk an organization is willing to accept for any one hazard or combination of hazards, and the overall impact to the organization's well-being. Risk management is present in many aspects of our daily lives and our personal lives as well. This is an example of a document used for a risk-based approach to food safety. Organizations typically identify, assess, and understand risks to which they are exposed and take appropriate action to mitigate based on the level of risk they're willing to accept. In this instance, we're reviewing a traditional HACCP-style process risk assessment, which strives to identify biological, chemical, physical risk associated with each step in a production process. So just a real quick poll question here for those who are certificated. What certification does your organization currently have, or which you are seeking? We have FSSC 22000 packaging, BRC packaging, SQF packaging, or a food safety standard, whether it be FSSC 22000, BRC GS Food, SQF, or if it's a storage and distribution standard. So that would fit under that food standard or other. Or if you're not sure. All right, so we have 28% that land under BRC packaging and 40% with SQF, 20% with the food and 12% that aren't sure. And there are no FSSC 22000 packaging people here on the call today. Well, it's really good for you, BRC packaging people, because I pull out an example later in my presentation that fits right in with BRC packaging. So each of the main product safety and ISO standards identify requirements that are based on risk. ISO 9001 includes risk-based thinking throughout the standard. The risk-based thinking applied in 9001 has enabled some reduction in prescriptive requirements and a replacement by performance-based requirements. 9001 also requires organizations to plan actions to address risk. However, there is no requirement for formal methods for risk management or a documented risk management process in 9001. The most common packaging standards do require formal methods for risk management and a documented risk management process. However, they also allow for risk-based exclusions. The reason for these risk-based exclusions are some of the requirements in the standards. They've been written to reflect expectations that are typical of product and process technology that are used across a range of packaging formats, like plastic, paperboard, glass, metals, etc. And occasionally, a requirement may not be appropriate in a particular operation. So based on risk, exclusions from the requirements may be permitted. However, in each case, a documented risk assessment must be provided to the auditor for the evaluation of the exclusion when you're going through certification. The requirements for organizations is to be responsible for their application of risk-based thinking and the actions that they take to address the identified risks they have within their system. So let's take a look at how this works in the packaging industry. In the world of certification, there are a few terms and implications of certificates that I'd like to go over. There's not applicable, or NA. These are activities covered by the standard that are not part of your processes. For example, the standard may include printing processes, and your organization performs extrusion blow molding only, no printing at all. The requirements for printing are considered NA or not applicable. In this case, there is no impact to your certificate. Exclusion type 1, your organization decides to exclude a portion of your business that is segregated from the rest of the business, i.e., your company has a separate area for printing labels for a specific client that uses special inks. This is permitted. However, the certificate will be modified to state the details of the excluded portion of your business. And I want you to think about this, that within certification, when you receive a certificate, you're implying that every aspect of your business falls under the certification. So when you make exclusions, we have to call out what these exclusions are, like in Exclusion 1. Exclusion 2, your organization decides to exclude a portion of your business that is not segregated from the rest of the business, such as your company does not have a separate segregated area for printing labels for a specific client that uses a special ink. You would like to exclude line 2, which is between lines 1 and line 3, and there's no segregation. So this is not permitted. You can't exclude production lines that are in the middle of lines that are part of your certification because of the risk inherent in that exclusion. So we just don't permit that. Exclusion type 3, which is risk-based and is the basis of this presentation today, is that your organization has reviewed the risk associated with a requirement and can justify the risk is minimal based on programs in place to mitigate that risk. The risk is then documented with a risk assessment that is reviewed, approved, and most importantly, monitored. This is permitted with no impact on your certificate whatsoever. But in all these cases, during the certification audit, the auditor will review and approve or reject the risk assessment.
Jennifer, I got a quick question for you. So if you're saying if a company has a documented risk assessment, they can avoid the requirements, is that correct?
You know, Scott, the answer to this is yes and no. A company cannot just pick and choose the requirements that are hard to meet. They must follow the guidelines and truly justify why the exclusion is in place. Exclusions are always at the discretion of the auditor to accept or reject based on the justification and their knowledge of the industry. A company must be fully ready to explain and sometimes defend their risk-based exclusions that they put in place.
Thank you.
I mentioned a few slides ago that we would discuss RPN, or risk prioritization number. Most of us are familiar with this concept. RPN is a numeric assessment of risk assigned to a process or steps in a process as part of risk assessment, in which a team assigns the values that quantify likelihood of occurrence, likelihood of detection, or severity. In this example, we're using likelihood of occurrence or probability and severity to define the risk prioritization number, which allows us to assign values systematically and objectively. The probability is multiplied by the severity to generate the RPN. In this case I'm showing you, a hazard that has a rating of 1 is a very low risk, whereas a rating of 20 is a high risk. In traditional hazard programs, we define risk management by PRP, OPRP, or CCP. We can use the same risk-based thinking when calculating risk for requirements identified as risk-based in the standards by applying a color coding system with the actions identified. In this example, a red risk requires a control point or critical control point. Blue requires an OPRP or a control point for the FSMA, Food Safety Plan. Green can be controlled by prerequisite programs or PRPs, and white requires no control at all to be put in place. Along with this is an example of how probability and severity are defined with the specific objective information. 1 per 5 years is defined as an unlikely category, whereas if it occurs minimum weekly, it's defined as a frequent category. Under severity, catastrophic is defined as hazards resulting in death, and negligible is defined as not resulting in illness or injury.
Hey, Jennifer, are these descriptions for RPN set in stone, or can a company define their own parameters?
Scott, that's a very good question. How a company defines probability and severity is based on their experience and knowledge of their products, their processes, and how their products are used in the market or by the next user of the product.
Very much.
Next, we pull this all together to create a form to build a documented risk-based exclusion. It's common to use the same information used to prioritize risk in your HACCP or product safety plans, and the same RPN criteria to call out the zones for each type of risk category. This is an example of how an organization can document a risk-based exclusion. We always start with header information, date, topic, description, and who's completing the risk assessment. And that's here on the slide. Next, using the information available, we determine the probability and severity to determine the RPN and the zone that the risk is in, or what we're excluding is in. We always start by identifying the justification for the risk-based exclusion. Once this is completed, the score and the color can be identified. Then the risk-based exclusion can be determined. White zone risk can be excluded with proper documentation and or programs, which are put in the justification section of the form here. So I'm going to give you an example of how this looks. In BRCGS Packaging Materials Issue 6, Clause 6.51, in the third part of the clause down there, it says, where a risk assessment has been determined that protective clothing is not required in a particular area, it shall be fully justified and not pose a contamination risk to the product. This can be used as a risk-based exclusion. So let's complete a form for justification for not wearing hair nets or beard nets in an exterior warehouse, meaning a warehouse that is not attached to the main building where production occurs. So we complete the form by filling in the information at the top, and then we move on to the second half of it, and we put the justification in. So here I've added justification that products received in the exterior warehouse are fully enclosed, and that products are completely labeled prior to entering the exterior warehouse, eliminating the need to open overwrap, and that all of our employees have been required to complete annual GMP training. Based on this justification, we can conclude that there's an unlikely probability and a negligible severity risk associated with extraneous hair entering the product in the exterior warehouse, and this can be rated as SCORE Zone White. This risk assessment can be used to justify not wearing hair or beard nets in the exterior warehouse. It's important to note that, like all food safety plans and HACCP plans, that these risk-based exclusions must be included in your risk assessment review program, which requires review at a defined interval. Most standards require an annual review when processes change, when there's a customer complaint or a recall withdrawal at a minimum. Using the simple method of risk-based exclusions can be a tremendous help in the implementation of your product safety plan. But as I just mentioned, this is not a one and done scenario. Monitoring is the key to keep the risk-based exclusion current and up to date.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. I'm sure people have some questions that will be coming through here, and we can do that. In the meantime, we're waiting for them to show up. Please, everybody, take a look at the screen that's in front of us. These are just some of the upcoming trainings that we have, and you can scan the code, the QR codes that are there if you're in the USA or Canada to get to them. But we have a few FSPCA preventative controls, for human food and animal food coming up in October and November. We have GMP HACCP preventive controls and implementation, both coming up also in October and November. SQF and BRCGS trainings coming up, as well as our academy, which is online. And again, when you go on here and if you reach out to me directly, I can get you a discount code on your training. So please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to assess that for you. As another side note, just for those that have the ability, this week, I believe it's Thursday and Friday, both Jennifer and I will be in Pflugerville, Texas, just outside of Austin, at the BRCGS conference. And both of us will be there if anybody's over to sit down and chat with you. So please visit with us, okay? All right. So again, here's just another question for you. How can we help you? Can we help you with certification, testing, supply chain? How about a customized audit? We can actually put together an audit based on your products and your requests, or anything that we can work out together. Training, technical services. So we will wait a few more moments here to see how some people respond to this question. See if there's any responses here. They're still popping up. Look at that. Some good responses, people. We'd love to be able to do this. Hopefully we can answer the questions that do come up to you. Okay. They're still coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and just move on for due time here so we don't have people sitting. And we love to see these responses coming through. So thanks everybody for replying. Looks like almost 18% of you need help with certification. We'll be more than happy to assist you with there. Supply chain information, we have just under 4%. That's great. Customized audit. Training. Love to help everybody out with training. We're so good at that. Again, please reach out. We'll get you discounted service codes for those things as well. Okay. Okay. So here's our direct contact information for both Jennifer and I. These are our web addresses here that you can see us on that side. And let's see, while you're looking at that, what kind of Q&A questions we have. Please feel free to pop them up in the box. All right, so here's one question for us. Look at this. Jennifer, the question is how well are these risk-based exclusions received during the audit? Would you like to handle that?
Certainly. I think it's safe to say that professional auditors, they expect to see some level of risk-based exclusion based on the product category that they're auditing. I think it's best always to alert the auditor that there are risk-based exclusions in place after the opening meeting to allow that auditor to set time aside to be able to properly review those exclusions that you have in place.
Super, super, wow. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Jennifer, do you see any over there that you would like to answer? We can answer them offline if you'd like, if you think that's even easier at this point, because we're coming up on that 2:30 half-hour mark here. Okay. It looks like the rest of the things we can handle, they all want offline. A lot of people are looking for some offline responses, so we'll be more than happy to accommodate you. And again, feel free to drop us an email if there's other things that you're looking for. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. Here's a couple of them that are coming through here. And now the thing is starting to populate. Okay. I think the system is running a little bit behind today. All right. So Juan has asked that we mention that organizations should not pick and choose which requirements of a standard should be considered out of the scope. Can you provide some examples of which exclusions are valid versus ones that are not?
That's a very good question. And when I was answering your question earlier, Scott, I was trying to indicate that when you're choosing which requirements to exclude, you need to make sure that you have full justification, and you can't just exclude a requirement because it may be a challenge to meet the requirement itself. So as you go through and you look at the different requirements in the clauses, you need to understand, does it say on the basis of risk or risk-based? And if those are identified in that manner, then you're able to do a risk-based exclusion for those. If there is a requirement that says you must or you shall, then it's pretty hard to get a risk-based exclusion past an auditor for that one.
Okay, very good. Uh, and can you talk about HACCP and how it's different from all the other risk analyses and the methods, or when you should even use it?
Right. So HACCP is traditionally defined from, way back, it goes back a couple of decades. And when we think about HACCP, we think about food safety because we're identifying critical control points and we're looking at how we mitigate the risk at the very last step of the process, and we're identifying how that's managed. When we think about hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls, which is part of the Food Safety Modernization Act, we're really identifying how we mitigate risk along the way and what controls can we take so we don't get to the end of the process and have all the money into the process. So the mixing, the blending, the manufacturing, the processing of it, and then we have a final finished product that we're rejecting. So all the money has been put into it. And with risk-based preventive controls, we're saying, okay, let's stop it at step 3 because it's a problem now. So there are a number of different programs that are out there. And when I look at the food safety standards that I'm most familiar with, which is FSSC 22000, SQF, and BRC, they all require HACCP-based programs. And the reason for this is that they're international standards. And HACCP is an international program put out by Codex Alimentarius. When we think about risk-based preventive controls, it's very specific to the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is a US regulation. And as much as we would love to be able to put US regulations out there for the world to have to comply to, we just can't do that. So I encourage organizations to look at the basics of what HACCP requires and then add the additional things that have it make more sense to you. So if applying risk-based preventive controls makes sense, then definitely go down that path and apply those type of controls.
Okay. Very detailed information. Perfect way to put it. I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody that's on this call will appreciate that as well. Let's see here. There was a question that came up, Jennifer, and maybe you can address it, how we're going to handle the cannabis issues that keep coming up. We've been having calls on this, just about everyone. It seems like everybody's asking about cannabis. And I know we're talking about packaging. Would you like to try that one out and see how we want to talk about that today? Because it does get touchy.
Right. Because we cover, Scott, Canada and the United States, it's a bit of a different answer for both, whether you're in Canada or whether you're in the United States. So let's start with the easy one, Canada. It's federally regulated, and there are programs out there that say what we can or can't do based on Canadian regulations. In the United States, as everyone knows, we've not reached federal regulation. And if we're talking cannabis as itself, then it's still a class 1 narcotic. And I can't slice and dice it any other way than it's a class 1 narcotic. So with that being said, it's hard pressed to get any certification in the United States. Now, if we go back up to Canada, BRC Food has allowed for us to certificate cannabis because it's regulated there if it's used in a food product. If we come back and we talk about Canada and United States, and we're talking THC below 0.3% in a product, then we're talking about hemp, which is not regulated. And it's a different story, but even as a different story, it's still BRC Food who's allowing us to do those types of certifications.
Perfect. Thank you. It's a tough one that we have to deal with the legalities on, so we have to tread very carefully. All right. Let's see. And you may have an answer on this. A question came up about DNA profile testing for food fraud. Now, I know that doesn't directly have anything to do with our side on the packaging, but do you have any knowledge of how SGS is handling that you'd like to discuss today or not?
We do have the ability to do DNA profile testing for food fraud, and that information can be gained from our testing group. I don't remember the name of the program, which is terrible, but we do have that capability, and we can reach out to our testing group to get that answer, Scott, and send the answer to the person there. But we do have that ability.
Perfect. All right. Uh, let's see. So here's a good one that just came through. So it appears that most of the attendees here have either SQF or BRC. And there's been a few questions that have been popping up on the backside about FSSC. As we noticed, there was nobody that was certified to that, but it doesn't mean there aren't anybody interested. So are there any comments available on why a packaging company would choose one over another? It's very interesting how all this does seem to happen. We've seen it in the past when especially corrugated people tend to go more for the FSSC 22000 because that is based on 17021 scheme, very similar to the ISO 9000, which most of them do have. But what's your take on why somebody would use one over the other at this point?
Okay, so my take on why fewer companies choose FSSC packaging is that at this point in time right now, FSSC packaging is for food packaging only. Where if we look at BRC packaging, it could be for any type of packaging. And this is when that risk-based exclusion really comes into play. So when we look at the BRC standard, it'll say whether or not it's product content, whether or not it's a highly microbiological risky product. And it really gives you the ability to exclude things based on the type of packaging product you're making. Where FSSC, like I said, it's only food production. It does give you the ability to mitigate risk based on the type of packaging you're making, but again, it's only food. So that's one negative with FSSC. But on the positive, as you mentioned, Scott, with FSSC, is it is written to the same high-level standard that 9001, 14001, 45001 are all written to. And if you have 9001 certification, you can easily integrate FSSC 22000 into the program because almost all the requirements are the same number, the same similarity until you get to Clause 8. And Clause 8 in food safety is all about the HACCP plan and risk management. In QMS or 9001, it's all about your quality management system. With 14,000, it's all about your environmental management system, and it goes on that way. So FSSC allows you to integrate very easily with the other standards because of the high level standard.
Right, and that's very, very common. We've seen that in that industry. Here's another question that came up. What risk analyses method would you say is ideal for a packaging manufacturer? And the second part of that question is HACCP overboard, being that it's more focused around food processing. Maybe you can hit that on the packaging side.
Right. I think that whereas HACCP focuses on food manufacturing, when we take a step back and we look at physical, chemical, and biological, based on the type of packaging you're making, there could be risk associated with each of those categories. If you're doing a certification, it's saying that you're doing some type of HACCP-ish plan. They call it HARM or HERA, hazard and risk management or hazard and risk analysis. And they even add extra criteria into their risk assessment. So BRC will ask you to look at functional integrity, which is more of a quality aspect. A quick example of this is if you're manufacturing a blown bottle that's going to be used in the soda industry, the very top of the bottle where the caps sit is called the land. If you put a nick in the land of the bottle and you sell that bottle to a beverage manufacturer and they put their product in it and they cap it and they get a complaint for empty, low fill, or leaker, that's traced back to you sending them a quality defect. And so different requirements show up based on the standard that you're using. So I think that as a packaging manufacturer, it's good to follow the HACCP program. And 9 times out of 10, because of the process, you're not going to have too many biological risks, whereas you may have chemical and physical risk more, but you also have quality risks that you may want to take to get it to the next level.
Okay. Very good detail on that. We appreciate that because none of us want flat coat. Here's a question that came up, and I've seen it in several different pop-ups in different forms. So since we've gotten a couple, I might as well address it. They want to know kind of what the difference between a GMP and I've seen one for SQF, I've seen one for another one for BRC, et cetera. So maybe I guess the big difference, what's the difference between a GMP and I'll call it a GFSI certification?
I really like this question a lot because it gives us an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of an explanation. So when you think about GMP or good manufacturing practices, they are the programs that are in place that are the basis of any risk assessment you do. So we're talking housekeeping, pest control, preventive maintenance, those type of programs. And when you think about putting those in place and managing those activities, as you begin to develop your HACCP or your risk assessment, as the GFSI standards require, you can go through as you look at your risk and say, I have minimal risk of pests in my product or insects on my product because I have a good pest control program in place that's mitigating this risk. So GMP, I like to call it the foundation that your risk assessment is built upon. And once you have your GMP and your risk assessment completed, you're almost to GFSI certification. You have to add a few more things to your GFSI certification, such as managed review, internal audits, and such. But it's a stepwise approach. So I always highly recommend, if you're new to it, that you do GMP, HACCP, and then GFSI, because you're stepping up each time you go in.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, I think we've answered most of the questions that have come up that pertain to what we can openly discuss today. So I want to personally thank you, Jennifer, for your time, be able to take out and discuss what these requirements are and how to base it on risk. It's very, very important for everybody to understand how that is and kind of help everybody out with their exclusions. And everybody can know if they have any further questions on this, please email both Jennifer and or myself, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Again, we will be in, actually it's called Pflugerville, just outside of Austin later on this week for the BRCGS conference. I know I will also be in Texas in the Dallas area for IFT at the end of the month. And thank everybody for joining us today. You all have a great afternoon now.
And just one more comment, Scott. We're going to send you a survey. Will you please complete the survey and feed it back to us so that we know how we can improve our programs that we're putting on and better answer your questions?
And everybody that had the questions that we did not answer today or any further ones, please send them on through. We will answer those offline because there were a bunch of them that did not need public knowledge here. So thanks everybody very much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.